For Krima Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Khaya Dlanga joins me to discuss his death book titled These Things Really Do Happen to Me. Welcome, Khaya.
Thank you.
And thank you for your
very
time.
much.
This book, I don't know where should I begin about it, because you're discussing quite a few issues, if I may say. You talk about your first kiss, you talk about Valentine's Day, events at school. You even speaking about a rejection from a family that was like, no, you can't date him because he's black. Yeah, there's quite a few issues, but can you just tell us how the idea of sharing such stories came about?
Well, I think this happened like many years ago. So I think in the beginning of the book, I talk about suitcase, which is in my other book.
Yeah.
And because I had this suitcase that my mother had given to me when I went to study in Cape Town. So she gave me this suitcase. And so there was a point where I was homeless. So while I was homeless, I decided to take my suitcase and leave it at the church that I used to go to. So I asked them to keep the suitcase. I didn't tell them why, I just said I don't have any space. And every Sunday I'd go and check out to see if it was there. And then one Sunday it was no longer there. And eventually I found a place to stay. And then a few months later, there was a massive tornado in Cape Town. And this tornado ripped through Manenberg, Guguletu, and I forgot like other areas. And then it was a Sunday morning, and we got SMSs from the church saying that we're not going to church the following day. I mean, on the Sunday, that morning. Let's go and help out those communities that are devastated by the tornado. So we'll all go there, and while we're helping other homes, removing things, the rubble, giving away stuff, I got to this one house. When I looked to the left in the bedroom, it was also devastated by the tornado. So I almost thought by the tornado. The roof was gone, and I looked to the left, and there's a bedspread that looks identical to mine. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then I see there's a sheet as well. It looks exactly. And then below the bed, I see this suitcase. I was like, this is not a coincidence. This is definitely. So I go outside and I speak to a friend of mine. And I ask her and I said, listen, I don't know what to do because they've lost everything, but there's my suitcase. What do I do? And this is a suitcase. You need to get it. So I go and I speak to them and to that mom. And she was obviously lost everything. She was just devastated. And I tell her that this is my suitcase. And she says, no, her son got the suitcase. So her son brought the suitcase. Therefore, it's her son's. And then I said, I can prove that it's mine because the suitcase had it had a secret compartment in it. And that compartment had my photos. And I was hoping they didn't find this compartment. And when I opened, indeed my photos were there. And I showed them my photos. Just, take it. She was like, Dad. And then I was like, it's fine. All I want is a suitcase, keep the clothes, everything. I just want the suitcase because my mom loved that suitcase. Wow. And then so I remember every time I tell the story, people are like, what? That is crazy. What? And then I was like, well, actually, and then I kept telling other stories events that have happened to me. I was like, wow, these things really do happen to me. Like, they seem unbelievable, some of them, but they do happen.
I really enjoyed most of them.
Yeah.
You were raised by a single parent, but you didn't hold grudges from your dad, whom you said left your mom while you were also young. How were you able to understand this aspect?
I think I always say to people, I think for me it was a lot easier for a lot of people who have your parent is still alive, but the parent is never there. So your father is around, but it's just absolutely absent in your life. And I feel that a part of me was fortunate in the sense that he died when I was like turning 6. So because he died, it became easy for me not to feel any bitterness towards him than someone who would feel very bitter when a father is there, but it's just like an absent figure. So, and I think that's why for me I was able to get over that, and I never had any bitterness. Because I think it's easier to have a bitterness towards something you can confront. Because right now there's no way I could confront him because he passed away when I was young.
Yeah, and you also tell us about growing up in the rural areas, Etuchin.
Yes.
What was it like growing up there?
No, it was. I mean, it's like any typical village life. You know what I found very striking when I read when I read Madiba's Long Walk to Freedom, and I remember thinking, he's describing his life in the village exactly like 6 years later. I was living exactly the same life that he lived 60 years ago, and I found it particularly interesting in the sense that how time almost doesn't move in the village.
Exactly.
It just doesn't change because his life was identical to the life that I lived there, and it, you know, it was simple. It was a simple life. I mean, my grandfather was obviously very, very deeply involved in making sure that I have some discipline in my life.
Exactly.
He was not an easy man. I think he was well known. He was well liked, but also people were terrified of him in the village. Sorry, and I think people liked him because he was quite strict, and you always knew what you'd get from him. And of course, my grandmother was also very instrumental. Was almost the opposite, more gentle, and she was she was more permissive, you know, than my grandfather. And also, like, I mean, it was. And despite that, I also feel that had I stayed in the village, I think my life would have been completely different. Because my mom decided to take me out of the village when I was around 9. I mean, I was bunking school already. I mean, can you imagine at 8 I was bunking, and I was not only that, like, I'd been smoking weed already because weed was growing all over the place. So I was smoking weed. I was bunking school. I honestly I don't know what my life would have been like had my mother not taken me out of the situation. So it's I think that what the village can do is either it can make you very hopeless, and it's almost like you need to be taken out of it.
You are also telling us about how your grandfather was so strict to you. He always made sure that you had chores to do. But then your grandmother or your aunt, his sister, was always like against that.
Yes.
Tell us about that commotion.
You know, because my grandfather he always made sure he had something to do. He did not like to see someone sitting around and doing nothing, especially if you're a boy. So if you're a boy, I remember, and also like you never saw him just sitting around doing nothing either. So he'd always be like in the village, and he'd be either fixing the fence, you know, and I'd be standing. When I was too young to go and head cows and sheep and all of that. I'd be there, and he'd be, you know, fixing the wire, and I'm holding the pliers for him. I'm giving him nails to hold his nailing stuff, but I'm always doing stuff. So, and he'd find benches, and he'd fix the benches. And I think it's because he just didn't like to see idleness. But one of the funniest thing was that he'd always go to see his sister. His sister was a bit older than he was, and he'd get on his horse, his favorite horse, that was Commando, and we'd go about 2 kilometers down, and he'd go and visit her and spend like the day with her and just chatting. But they would always end up in a fight. Always. And my grandfather would then get off in a huff, get on his horse and go back home. But then he'd be back the next day and see her. And so I'd be chilling there sometimes, and then he'd be sending me up and down, do this and do that. And my, you know, his sister, my great aunt, would always be very like upset. Just leave the child alone. Let the child rest. I mean, why is the child always having to run around? Aren't you happy to see a child? Let the child play, you know? And then he'd be upset. Once I got home, he'd give me more. He'd kind of like, I think, almost punish me for the fact that I was protected when I was with my great aunt.
You are also addressing something that is very funny, but my boys were very happy because you spoke about wrestling, and I'm against wrestling. And they were like, Mom, he's saying it's educational. Tell us about you having to endure wrestling, because you didn't like it at first. You were into CNN, but your cousins were like wrestling, and you ended up liking it.
Yeah, so my mom, because she was a single mother, and there were like 4 of us, and with 5 including her, and she couldn't look after all of us. So she spoke to one of my uncles, and, you know, so they would take me in when I was in standard 8. So he took me in, and I was staying in this house. He had a satellite dish. This was like way back, like in Tanzania, which was like, wow, you've got. In fact, his house, when we were walking, other kids would refer to, oh, abandona bakulandini satellite, you know. And so were those kids. But what I'd love to do is that I'd love to watch like CNN, and because I'd be watching the news, I'm curious about that. But then my cousins, they just want to watch wrestling, and this would annoy me because they'd watch I'd be like, but you saw this yesterday. You're watching this and you're watching the same, and they had tapes that recorded, and then I would watch the same wrestling matches. But eventually I really got into it. But what I liked for me was I didn't know I was learning, to be honest, and I realized later that I was learning. So when in America, when a wrestler is being introduced, they'd say where they're from. So it'd be like, from San Antonio, Shawn Michaels. It's like, oh, okay. And then they'd be like, from Detroit, Michigan, Gold Dust, you know. I mean, it's not Gold Dust, a big, daddy cool Diesel. And then every single wrestler, or from Hollywood, California, Gold Dust, right? And then I realized, oh, wow, this is, and then I got to know what states, and I knew what cities were in each state in America. So it became quite educational, I think, for me, because that's what I picked up, because I wasn't just watching to watch, but I was also watching to learn certain things, like there's some words I even learned, like proclivity. You know, I remember Vince McMahon, like I don't know if it's interviewing, but it says you have a proclivity for such and things. Like, oh, that's a big word. What does that word mean? And found a dictionary.
To check.
And I checked. It's like, oh, that's a good word. I'd love to use it. And I think in an essay I was writing later that week, I used the word that I learned.
I wonder
in
if
wrestling.
the teacher was always even knew that word. Yeah, so my boys actually forced me to read that chapter, and they wanted me to say, introduce people like Shawn Michaels was doing. But anyway, you are also dedicating a beautiful chapter about your mom and about feminism. Can you tell us about your mom introducing you into these things? She was even riding horses in the village.
Yeah, so my mom, and I always said that she never, I don't think she would classify herself as a feminist because she's not a well-educated woman and she doesn't know what feminism is. But I think she's more rooted in the practical form of it, where she believes that women should be equal, boys and girls should be the same. And she never felt that I had said there were certain chores I could not do at home. So one, for example, was that I had to clean the house like everybody else. So I'd be cleaning, I'd be polishing. If I had to polish the stoop, I'd polish the stoop with the red beam thing. I baked bread, so I'd get all the ingredients and I'd bake. In fact, I baked the bread better than my sister. Baked the bread. I learned how to mend my own clothes. You know, get to sew them together. But at the same time, doing all those things that are supposedly just girl stuff, I also had to, cut the lawn. And cutting the lawn, we didn't have like mowing machines back then. You had a garden shear where you literally had to go like this.
I remember those.
and it had to be meticulous. It had to look like it was you use a lawn mower to do that. And it took hours, hours and hours and hours to finish it. So I did everything that girls did. I also did everything that I was supposed to do as a boy. So because my mom didn't really care about, okay, because you're a boy, you better. And I think it's because in some ways, her father, she says, actually, my grandfather, treated her like a boy.
You even changed nappies, Khaya.
No, I changed nappies. No, listen, I know how to I know how to change diapers. I know how to feed babies. I don't have a child of my own, but I know exactly how to do those things. There's nothing I don't know. If someone to leave a baby now and say, I would know exactly what to do. Someone has done
it as well.
Yeah, I'd know how to do it.
Yeah. You are also talking about your love for cars from a very young age. Tell us about that funny story when you were expecting visitors at home and you will be like shining with Vaseline blue seal.
So it's like, because I loved, And I think like most boys, they probably loved cars, you know. So my aunt and her husband, they were in Tanzania, and they had a good job and they had a car. So they'd come to visit at Dujini, which is near close to Mount Elif in the Transkei. So it's a good 6-hour drive or so from Tanzania to Mount Elif. And my aunt had a car and my uncle. And so they'd visited their children. And their children were always looking so nice because they lived in the big city.
Yeah.
And I was here in the village. You know, when you live in a village, there's like there's a grimeness that you have.
Rough around the
There's
edges.
a roughness that like is difficult to remove, especially when I still only live there and it's still a child. When they would arrive, so my mom used to tell me this story. She says that they'd arrive and I'd get there, and then I'd try to play with my one cousin who was a few months older than me, because I felt like maybe if I'm clean, I'd wash myself and then apply myself with Vaseline and I'm all shiny or this Vaseline, because I'm thinking, well, if I look clean, they'll take me with and bring me to the big city, you know. And then, but every time they would leave, they would go home alone and they would leave me there. And then when she left, and then I'd say, when they would leave, my mom says that I would say things, no, it's okay, Tula, and now I'm getting you mean which means that it's okay even if they leave. One day I will also go to Johannesburg and I'll buy a car as well. And funny enough, even though I lived in Cape Town for a very long time, it was only when I moved to Joburg when I actually did buy a car.
Yeah.
Which is funny that.
But you had chauffeurs around, people like who's this, the comedian? They were driving you around, and they were not like even complaining.
No.
Yeah.
No. Well, I think when I moved to Joburg and I didn't have a car, and because when I was in Cape Town, I never felt the need to drive or to get a car. I did not even try to get a license. I was like, okay, it's fine. I'm on the trains, it's okay. And I think a part of me was thinking that I'm not about to buy a car, so why am I even learning to drive? And because in my mind I was thinking that I've got family back home that I need to look after first, so I have to send money there. I have siblings who are still going to school, so a car is the last thing on my mind. And then I happened to get a good job at some point, and I managed to buy myself a car. But the chauffeuring thing was really hilarious because my friends, I think they spoiled me as well, because they'd always say things like, okay, so-and-so's going to come and pick me up, pick you up, and on the BBM group, just before WhatsApp.
My boys were asking me about BBM.
What's BBM? So, and they would ask where we, and then I'd be like, no, and then they'd like, okay, no, someone's closest. But it was funny because Trevor lived the furthest. And he'd always say, no, it's fine, because he loves to drive. So he'd just say, okay, guys, I'll pick Khaya up, and then he'd pick me up. So, and the security guards would always sometimes they'd stop me and say like, who are you? You have these famous people coming to pick you up all the time.
Exactly.
And I was like, no, I'm just nobody. These are just my friends. They just happen to be famous, but
You are also addressing a very serious issue that we're still dealing with in our country, the issue of racism. And you also experienced it in a school where you were the only person of color. What do you remember? Were you surprised actually about that?
You know, I was surprised that it happened to me, because I didn't think it would happen. Because when I got to the school, because I went to this school that was a formerly white school, and they allowed black kids in the school. And I was the only black kid in my class. I think in a school of about maybe 800 people, they must have had 7 or 8 black people when I went that year. And the kids were super nice. They were incredible. And I kept wondering if they were briefed to be nice, you know, like because they were the entire school. So I never felt any racism, except for this one time. I mean, during break, they would buy me things, food. I never felt any separation to such an extent that when I was, because it was so rare in fact, let me say it was so rare. It did not happen that black people in the township saw a black child wearing school uniform from other kids from those schools. So the uniforms are obviously very different, very
Yes.
distinct. So when people saw the uniform, they knew you went to white school immediately. And I remember I'd be walking, maybe I caught a taxi and I'd walk, and people would stop me and ask me, "Do you really play with the white kids?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, yeah, we play." "No, really, during break you play together?"
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we play together, the white kids. They're like, "And you eat together?" "Yeah, yeah." "And you are in the same class? You don't, there's not a separate class for
That
black
was
people?"
strange.
And I was like, "No." And so for them, it was a very, and then that randomly, "So do you speak English?" And I'd be like, "Yes." And then they say, "Okay, speak English then." Just random, because I
that
couldn't
was
believe that
funny.
a child would, that young was speaking English. And but the thing about the racism that I experienced was, and I think this kid was trying to show off because he was the only Portuguese child in the class, and I have a second suspicion that maybe he always had a need to fit in, and I think I only thought about this years later, long after I left school even.
Yeah.
So primary school, standard 5, and he kept trying to provoke me. I don't know what he was saying, and I'd ignore him. There's no teacher. For some reason, there's no teacher in the class that day, and they took Tipex, and then he put like it marked me with Tipex, and says, "Oh, so you think you're white, eh?" So I ignore him. I was like, whatever. And then says, "Hey, you think you'll never be white? You think you're white?" I was like, I ignore him, and then he says, "You think you're white, Kefa?" And then I was like,
Wow.
and then I lunge at him because I want to punch him. Because I know this word is meant to be offensive. I don't know what it means, but I know when it's said to a black
It's a
person,
bad word.
it's never a good thing. But then some of the kids, they hold me back, and they hold him back, and I'm so mad. I just want to fight him. And then this Darren grabs my arm, and I think that he's going to report me to the principal because he's white. I'm thinking that that's what he's going to do. He grabs my hand, and I'm crying, and I'm in tears. Marches me to, and he knocks on the door, and he knocks on the principal's door, and he pushes me in and says, "Report him." And I'm like, wow. And I get in, the principal's in a meeting, and he stops the meeting immediately because he says I'm crying. He says, what's going on? And then I said, this boy called me a kafir. He says, "What?" He asked Darren to go and call the boy up. Calls the boy. He comes in. Says, "Why did you call Khaya a kafir?" I says, "I didn't, sir." So are you calling Khaya a liar? And then he says, "No, sir." "So was he lying?" I says, "No, sir." And then he says, "Do you know what Portuguese people are called? Would you like me to call you that?" And he says, "No, sir." And he starts crying, and then they shake hands. And then they asked us to shake hands. They shook hands, and that was the end of that. And I became really good friends with this boy afterwards. But that was like a very big, I think, encounter with racism when I was a child in school.
You are also well known in the social media space. Tell us how were you exposed firstly into vlogging on YouTube back in 2006?
I remember I was looking for a video, and I don't know what that video was on YouTube. But I knew that there was this thing called YouTube where you could find videos that you were looking for. And I was looking for this video and searching. And while I was searching, I saw that there was this thing where people were talking to camera, normal everyday people, and they were getting views, and people were commenting, and other people making responses to these videos. I was like, what is going on? Are people actually doing this? And so that made me, I became really curious about it. And because I also needed a creative outlet, because I'd stopped doing stand-up comedy because I used to do stand-up. And so this was another outlet for me. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And then I just started making videos, and what happened there was, and for some reason, people, I think, found it quite interesting that there was someone from Africa making videos. And they were like, wow, you're from Africa? What, you guys have got the internet? You are. So it was hilarious. And but what was quite interesting was the very popular YouTubers also discovered me, and they became really curious about me, and they'd promote my channel and asked me to collaborate with them. And I got big really, really quickly. But I was only known in the US and Canada, in Australia and the UK.
Wow.
And literally, I think in South Africa, maybe 1% of my views came from if even 1% from South Africa.
Very strange.
So because no one knew anything
Yeah.
about it. And it got to such an extent that, because I used to comment on US politics as well, and Obama was running for the presidency at the time, and that I got an email from the YouTube corporate head offices saying that Obama is coming to the offices and would I like to ask him a question. And then I was like, yeah, of course I'd love to ask him a question. And I asked Obama a question, on YouTube. And at the time, he had not been interviewed by a single news outlet on the continent, the African continent. And I was the first person to kind of ask him questions. So I found YouTube was very good to me, and it became a catalyst, I think, for a lot of things, even for my writing. Fun enough, it was a catalyst for it, because I was asked to write to blog for the Mail and Guardian, because someone saw a video I'd made on YouTube, and that video had been put on the front page of YouTube, and they were like, "Oh, you're making some very good points about." I was talking about South Africa, because someone had made. There was another vlogger at the time who said that South Africa is the most racist country in the world.
Wow.
And, we hate white people and all of those things. That's what they say. And that's actually, that is not true. And so I actually stated some facts. Like, I literally went factual, which you could not dispute. And so when these people from the Mail and Guardian saw me, thought leader saw my video, they said that maybe I could write. I was like, no, but I don't write. I just make YouTube videos. They're like, whatever you feel comfortable, just do it. And then I just started writing blogs. That's how it happened.
And the last two questions I have are from my boys, because like I told you, I've been reading this book with them. So my younger one, Utobani, was asking,
how old is
if he's 9,
Yes.
he was asking if you've been keeping a diary, because he was so fascinated about how you remember everything from
I don't.
back in the days.
I don't keep a diary, but I think what happens is that when an event it's also scientifically proven thing that when an event is out of the norm, your mind stores it easily, so it stays there.
Yeah.
And cause the encounters that I described there are also a little bit out of the norm, and so it's not because I keep a diary, but there are things where my mom will remind me of something, or someone will say something and then I remember it, or I have letters that I'd written or things that I'd written that my mom for some reason has stored and kept, and then she'll send like on Sunday she'll send me a letter that I'd written when I first got to Troop A in Cape Town. And I was like, wow. When I read that letter, I was like, that is amazing, because in the letter I said to her, I'm not going to disappoint her, she's going to be proud of me.
Wow.
I'm not going to fail. In fact, I'm one of the best performing students. In fact, I was the top student at the time. And I also said to her, I know she raised us from nothing. She didn't have much. I want her one day to look at all her children and say, look at where they are now and what they've become.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's because she said that. I was like, what? I wrote that when I was 18.
Yeah, that's cool. And Osamgelo, my 12-year-old, wanted to know if a part of you still misses living in Ejuchini, back in the rural areas.
No, I wouldn't say I miss it. Because I never want to romanticize the life in the village, because life in the village is very hard.
Yeah.
It's very harsh. And I think what I do miss maybe is the quietness. It's the it grounds you like a lot, and that's why I go to the village quite often. But what is sad now is that there are no more grown-ups. There are no people in my home, so the home is like literally crumbling. It's literally crumbling because there's no one there, and so that makes me a bit sad, because I know in the future I feel like no one is going to go there anymore because there's nothing to go back to. So that's yeah, I miss it. It just makes me sad.
Oh. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That was Khaya Dlanga speaking to Polity about his book titled These Things Really Do Happen to Me.